Thank you so much for coming, and apologies for the delay. Apologies to whoever is online for the delay, but we had a slight logistical challenge. So I will seek to be really short because I'm immensely grateful and honored by the composition of this panel. It's absolutely fantastic to have 4 people who have done so much around advancing knowledge on quality of life and social change as we have this panel today. I'm not going to introduce each of them because they have such a long list of expertise that I will give that to each of them to introduce themselves.
My name is Joe Sergi, and I am an industrial organizational psychologist. So psychology essentially is my discipline. Although I'm in management, I'm a professor of marketing and management, a professor emeritus, I should add. And the subject of social change is, of course, probably the underpinning of what we do here, studying well-being, because ultimately you want to translate many of those concepts, very rich concepts and models, into something that may help us create positive social change. And social change, of course, can occur at different levels of analysis. It occurs at the individual level. It occurs at the family level, at the community level, at the state level, at the international level. And there are, of course, many institutions that are involved in this process. But being a psychologist, I focus on the individual. And I submit to you that in the context of social change, we need to understand that we can institute social change at the individual level by understanding, again, the finer distinctions of the concept of well-being. Let me repeat that, the finer distinctions of the concept of well-being. What do I mean by that? Again, I had several publications that articulated these finer distinctions, and I'm just going to very briefly say something about them. So at the individual level, you can conceive of well-being as a concept that is very much based on physiology. As a matter of fact, neurophysiology or neurobiology for that matter. And you can talk about neurotransmitters. So what is well-being at the physiological level? Well, at the physiological level, it translates into what you might call a preponderance of positive neurotransmitters. What are those positive neurotransmitters? These are serotonins, this is this is oxytocin, and so forth. So, so we're talking about a preponderance of positive neurotransmitters that are balanced against the negative neurotransmitters. And what are the negative neurotransmitters? The most important one of them is cortisol, okay? Well, that's at the physiological level. And of course, if you want to institute, you can create all kinds of interventions that would allow, in terms of drugs, for example, that would change the individual to increase the well-being of the individual at the physiological level. But at the emotional level, which is like one level up, we're talking about emotional well-being. Emotional well-being, what does that mean? And again, we can talk about counseling programs and all kinds of psychological interventions that would change emotional well-being to increase positive affect, positive feelings against negative feelings. So the idea is to try and create a greater preponderance of positive feelings that, again, would overcome, again, a set of negative feelings, positive feelings in terms of happiness, in terms of joy, in terms of contentment, negative feelings from anger and disgust and fear and depression. So again, we can talk about social change at that level, at the emotional level. You can further go up one level and you can talk about, again, that at the cognitive level, because at the cognitive level, people make evaluations about their lives, but in the context of domain. So at the cognitive level, we talk about domain satisfaction. So you're trying to increase satisfaction in work life, in family life, in leisure life, in sex life, right? On and on. So the idea is to develop a preponderance of satisfaction, domain satisfaction. And we have intervention, social change that would allow counselors and other kinds of practitioners to come in there and try and increase domain satisfaction in those domains that that are deficient, so to speak, deficient. Further up the ladder, social change can occur at the life satisfaction level. So not talking about domain satisfaction, we're talking about life satisfaction. Again, that seems to be the major concepts of this, at least at this conference, but there's a whole lot more that if you travel up the hierarchy, you'll see that it's not just life satisfaction. And therefore we can institute social change by manipulating or educating how people make life satisfaction decisions by using different standard of comparisons. You know, people, when you make when you ask a person, how do you feel about your life at large? It's very likely that the person who would answer this question would use a very specific standard of comparison. Well, my life is okay, but relative to what? Relative to what? And people use those standard of comparison to try and make life satisfaction judgments. And very unfortunately, that many of our metrics don't take into account that reference point, that standard of comparison. You just simply ask a person, how do you feel about your life at large? No, 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 you don't do that. We can do better. Anyway, so social change can occur at the life satisfaction level. You can take it one step up, one further notch up, and you can talk about well-being as eudaimonia. We can talk about eudaimonic well-being. And that's an entirely different concept of well-being. It's not evaluation of life. It's something to do with personal growth. It's something to do with personal development. You know, from a developmental psychology perspective, it's an entirely different concept. And you can institute social change at the developmental level by, again, trying to instill or build certain character points or personality characteristics such as optimism. And you get people become extroverted. You become people to be more hopeful. These are characteristics associated with eudaimonia. And finally, at the very highest level, we can talk about well-being as socio-eudaimonia, in the sense that people can be integrated within their community, within their society. And we can talk about things like social acceptance. We can talk about things like social coherence, social actualization, how people are integrated and contribute to their communities and society at the individual level. Let me stop there.